So we're gonna get going. So Christine is delayed. She's coming down from Burlington, Vermont, so she's been delayed. So we're gonna start without her, just to keep on schedule. We have a pretty full day today, and let her catch up from there. So welcome. Thank you very much. This is one of the highlights of my year, of the eCenter's year. It's always fantastic to meet successful entrepreneurs, hear their stories, and ultimately celebrate them and induct them into a second year of our Alumni Entrepreneur Hall of Fame. So welcome. Just by show of hands to help the inductees get a sense of who's here. If people could just raise their hand if you're a first year student. Sophomore? Great. Junior? Senior? Great. How many of you have entered competitions, business plan competitions or otherwise? Great. How many of you have launched a company? How many of those are revenue generating? Fantastic. Great. So just for your perspective, a sense of these are the cream of the cream here that their second home is the eCenter. And so it's always a fantastic way to sort of engage. If each of you haven't already, which it looks like almost all of you have, the name was facing you, so you knew where to sit, and then you can share the names with everyone else. So what will happen is that each of the inductees will spend about 5 minutes, tell a little bit about their story, sort of the highs, the lows, hopefully a little bit about how UNH prepared them to get to where they are today. Then we'll open it up to questions. Questions for you. I have some questions as well. If here's that awkward lull or to kick it off. I don't think with this group there will be, but I'm always prepared. And then at the end, I'm going to sort of pick on a couple of you to give a 30-second pitch about your company and your number one problem, and to take advantage of who's here to share their insights to help you with that. So kicking off at roughly 3:30, this will go till probably a little bit before 5. We're going to do a tour afterwards. So Christine, welcome. Come all the way around here. Oh, no, it's all good. No, we literally kicked off. So nice to see you. So there's a mic for you to mic up. So Christine probably has this all the time because she's alphabetically at the front end. I'm not going to pick on her first. Thank you. So maybe Thomas, I'll start with you to sort of give 5 minutes of who you are, how you got here, and go from there. Thank you.
So as you can see, my name is Thomas Hazel. I graduated in '95 in computer science. I came to UNH because they had a unique program where I wanted to do theory, I wanted to do applied, and I liked the area, to be frank, and I jumped all in. The program was fantastic. I learned so much from the professors. I got to do an internship at a local company called Cabletron Systems. If you folks are familiar with Cabletron, it was a big high-tech company here up in New Hampshire, and they crushed it back in the day, and I learned amazing things. So I would say how I got here was, I guess, by accident. Computer science is my love. I love solving wonderfully hard problems in mathematics or algorithms or et cetera. And obviously after school, you gotta get a job. And I looked around and started to work at a big company. And then somebody about a year into it said, hey, would you like to do this startup thing? And I'm like, I don't know, sure. And it was nerve-wracking. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And I'm on my 6th startup now, and creating new ideas, solving really hard problems, building out a business, building out a company, and building product is something that I absolutely love to do. And UNH prepared me wonderfully for that. And I've worked now with the eCenter recently with some new entrepreneurs coming out of the school. And I would say it's the best thing you can do in your life. It gives you purpose every single day, but it's hard. It's really hard, but it's so satisfying. You control your destiny. And again, if anyone's looking for a computer science job and want to work in Boston, give me a call.
Great, thank you. So one thing I realized, we have 5 inductees and there's only 4 people sitting up here. I realized that I didn't address why that's the case. So Joe Farrow has a conflict. He had already committed to speak actually at Paul College today. There's a lot going on with homecoming weekend. He will be here later, definitely for the induction ceremony and the reception, so you'll be able to speak with him there. So I just wanted to identify why that's the case. So Les, why don't you go? I'll let Christine still catch her breath.
Great, all right.
We got her lost.
Nice to be here with you all. So my name is Les Hisco. I graduated in '87 with a civil engineering degree. And I had a great experience here, and I'm probably the example of a little bit of a different type of entrepreneurship. So I came out of school, and I actually got here through a summer job with a company, a construction company, that then ended up building what I think is pretty decrepit Channel 11 public TV station out on the corner there. And I arranged my schedule to work there 2 days a week during my senior year, and I ended up going on with that company for 10 years after school. So, and then I left and I moved to Boston, then I moved to New York, and I joined the company I now run. And in all of that time, I was building business units within that company. So really kind of, I think, entrepreneurialism within a company. So not necessarily, entrepreneur doesn't mean startup only, in my mind. And it's been wonderful. And, I think I got a great, solid kind of problem-solving education in the engineering program. And then I hit the real world and realized, okay, that's one piece of it, one small piece, and there's sales, and there's managing people, and there's then finally hopefully leading a successful company. So just happy to be here. Very impressed by the hand raising before, and thinking, God, why didn't I start a company when I was your age? I just probably didn't have the courage, and I know it takes a lot of courage. So for that, I admire all of you.
Great. Thank you, Les. Harry?
Well, I'm a class of 58. I'm probably older than most of you people here. They probably, when I came to school here, I was the first generation in my family to go to school, get out of high school and go to college. My father wasn't quite so sure that that was a great thing to do, but so I applied. I got accepted to a college up north, and I got accepted to UNH. But the tuition here was $600, and my dad thought this is the place to start. So, and then I got a scholarship because I lived in Carroll County. And when I got my scholarship, I think tuition was maybe $300, $400. And I had a couple $100 to buy cigarettes and candy bars and whatever. So that's how I got started at UNH. And as far as scholastically, I think UNH does a great job. But what I took away from here was the people. Great people. I got a lot of stories about great people that I met here. And that's it.
Great. So a little bit about your business.
My business.
Well, at least National Land Partners and...
Right. I have a business, National Land Partners. We're the largest buyer and seller of land in the country. We do land. We have revenues now of probably $250 million a year. We're trying to keep it there without having it grow much. I've been doing that for the last 30 or 40 years. It's been pretty profitable. But again, when I went to college, when I was in UNH here, I needed a job, and I asked my dad what I should do, and he says, sell something. What do I sell? So I got a job as a Kirby vacuum cleaner salesman. And I sold vacuum cleaners, Portsmouth, Kittery, wherever. But my first sale, I'll tell you this, I spent 36 demonstrations lugging that vacuum cleaner in the house and lugging it out, and I never got a sale. But I made my first sale about 100 yards from here with Dr. Handy. I don't know what happened to Dr. Handy, but I've been looking for him. But that started me on a career, and I was in sales for a lot of years. And our company now, we specialize in sales and marketing. And we've done communities, I think, in 47 or 48 of the states. So it's been a nice endeavor. It still is.
Thank you. Christine?
Hi, and excuse me for being late. I drove from Vermont, which is where I live and where my company's based. I'm a graduate from UNH class of '88, and I was a business major at the time. It was a Whittemore School of Business, and I was business administration with a minor in marketing. Or I guess concentration, I don't think I had a full minor. But the experience I had, I think, as a business admin major was a good, well-rounded exposure to business. And as a student coming into the school, I had, my dad was in sales. So I really had no idea, other than sales, what I might do with my life. And business seemed like a good approach to my education and a good foundation. So when I graduated, my first job, actually, I got a job offer to be in customer service for an insurance company, and I literally cried when I got the offer because I couldn't even imagine answering phones all day and that career path. And so I held out and I waitressed and lived in Boston, and then I ended up working at an ad agency, but an in-house agency for a hotel chain that was based in Boston, Sonesta Hotels. So I did that for a couple years, and my boss was amazing, and she said, you know what, if you like advertising, you really do need to go to New York. So she hooked me up with some interviews down there, and I ended up getting a job in New York at an ad agency, and 3 agencies later, and 6 years later, I left the city, and took some time off and spent a year traveling and working in Alaska, and then I ended up being a ski bum in Vermont. And I was in my mid-20s, late 20s, I guess, 26 at the time. So it was a choice I made because I knew I wasn't a city girl. I didn't want to stay there. And I'm like, I might as well do something fun while I figure out what the next step is. So I ended up in Vermont skiing, and then at the time I was dating the man I ultimately married, but we ended up staying and finding jobs and got engaged, got married, had a family, and I stayed. I actually worked at a design studio. It's called JDK, and they were the ones who did all of the graphics and marketing for Burton snowboards. So it was an amazing place to have found in Vermont, because I left New York thinking, all right, I'm kind of taking a step down here in my career, but it ended up being a perfect fit, and I worked there for 20 years, actually.
Where in Vermont?
Burlington.
Really?
Yeah. So my story is kind of I think, late bloomer to entrepreneurship, and it came from personal experience. So the company that I co-founded is a company called Mamava, and we make freestanding spaces for women who are breastfeeding or want to use a breast pump to nurse their baby. And they're portable, mobile, they're clean, private, dedicated spaces. And this idea really came from the fact that I had children, and I went back to work after 12 weeks, which is not a lot of time. And for those of you who might not understand, if you want to continue breastfeeding, and you're not with your baby, you have to use a breast pump. So having an office, it really wasn't an issue. I had a door I could close and do my thing, and you have to use it like every 3 hours. So I traveled though for work. So I ended up in places when I was on client visits, in filthy bathrooms and backseat of clients' cars and closets, so wherever you could find a place. And fast forward like 10 years, the owner of, and it was not a good experience, but I motored through and had 2 more kids and did it 2 more times. But 10 years about after that, the owner of the design studio challenged all of us who worked there to think about ideas or think about challenges in the world that design could solve. And we came up with this idea, okay, there are no spaces, and this is our experience. Let's find out if there's more people out there who've had this experience. It didn't take much to figure out, yeah, this is a good idea. So we were given resources and time to develop it. So it was incubated within the design studio. And then about 4 years ago, we had resources, and the company had gotten traction enough that we could spin it off to a separate company. So today we have like 1,000 pods out there. We call them pods. And they're in places where moms are. So pretty much everywhere, airports, train stations, zoos, hospitals. So there's really no business that isn't an opportunity for us to sell one of these. And we're really fortunate, because around the time that we were really writing a business plan and thinking, okay, this really does need to be a business, and we were finding a manufacturer, the legislation in 2010 became law that businesses of over 50 employees had to have a space that's not a bathroom for mothers to express milk. So that was really the kind of push for us to be like, all right, if we don't do this, someone else will. And that's really taken our business to the next level, because a lot of states and municipalities have even stronger legislation now, and it continues to be something that's really topical. So
That's great, and that's probably a great jumping off point. So you sort of identified this problem. So for the three of you, unless I completely agree that innovation is required, that will actually be an additional question later, within an existing structure to stay alive. So, but for each of you, what was that first problem that you solved to create your entity or a new division or something like that? And Thomas, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I'll do my most recent company, Chaos Search, searching the chaos, kind of playing words. I'm a computer scientist. I love crushing numbers, and so I saw a problem with data growing. We've all heard of big data. Data's growing bigger and bigger, more information, more problems, and accessing that data provides value to businesses. And I thought I was clever enough about 5 years ago to create a new representation of information such that I could store more and do it at a price and ease that is quite unique in the market. And the innovation for me is find the hardest problem that has the biggest value. And the problems are typically harder, but the value is typically greater. And so for me, dealing with information, as we all know, is so important this day and age, information age. I wanted to solve that problem, and we built a business around that technology. And we're roughly, I would say, the history of a startup is a lot longer than prior to funding, but 5 years, but funding around 3.5 years, and we're upwards of 35 employees and lots of customers and all that. But I'd say innovation. Next thing is people. Find the best people that you can find.
Great. Les, so at Chalmette, what was the first project? What was that first innovation that you sort of identified the problem that needed to be solved?
Yeah, so for us, my industry is construction, and construction is, and you'll hear me say this actually tonight which is going to be my problem for everybody to solve, but it's really productivity and the construction industry, and we're a big company, we're 1.5 billion across the country, and so that comes with 1,500 people, and as we grew the company, we got kind of bigger and with more process and with more checks and balances and with more control, and that really stifles or can stifle innovation in the firm. And so ideas, which really need to happen kind of at the user level, which is really where your idea had to come from, is that experience, really can't get acted on in a kind of bigger company structure. So we ended up creating an innovation committee of kind of frontline folks. We funded them with a software platform that was really kind of social, that people could kind of vote on ideas, and we'd put challenges out, or it could be a free kind of environment. Vote on those ideas come forward, and so it's really trying to unlock kind of innovation in the firm. What that all led to was that our process was having our people focus, and we're all about client service and having our clients have great experiences and our people have great experiences working for us, therefore they're energized, therefore that shows up to the client. Our people were, for lack of a better expression, chained to their computers with our process and not out dealing with customers, having that one-on-one, creating those relationships, and then delivering that better service. So that led us into a whole kind of process simplification platform, and with that, lots of different technologies and so on. So, and I've got 20 more stories, but
yeah, great.
We can go there. Yeah.
And Harry, how did you figure out about the land?
Well, when you have a great idea, it's an entrepreneurial business and you're small. Biggest problem is getting it financed, getting the cash to operate. And the cash to operate, you got to find somebody who wants to invest in your idea. Now, if you can find an individual family member or somebody you know really well, and that takes that off the table, but in most cases you can't. So it's going to regular, typical commercial banks is not the easiest thing in the world with a new startup idea. And you need to build some time, you need to build a reputation. You need to get on your numbers so that they have they're convinced that you're going to make it. And you need to sell your idea, and you got to start small, and you got to build it. Unless you can find a source of financing right out of the box, and that's not always easy, is it?
No.
Right? It's financing and capital. So that was my problem.
What I think is interesting there is in civil engineering, and I'm sure in computer science when you went through it, and we didn't get one iota of sales kind of education, not one. And the number one thing that you have to do with any idea, with any company, with any business, is sell it, right? And so to me, that's been an evolving thing, as you go in your career. But I'm still remarked at so many kind of curriculums that really don't have a sales component, no matter what it is.
Yeah. I think my experience was different because my career was in marketing and I was actually in new business. So I could, excuse the language, sell the shit out of the idea. And we had this brand and mission and vision. We had all of the, components of a brand before we had a product. We had no idea how to make a product. So it's the opposite. Yeah.
So I have a host of more questions, but you're here to ask your questions, right? So who has questions, not about your own business, but for them about their businesses? So go ahead, Dylan, start.
So for Mr. Hazel, as a serial entrepreneur, how do you know when it's time to move on to the next one?
It's funny. I get that question a lot, and I have this whole theory, and I think I just gave a presentation about momentum. And your job as a serial entrepreneur is to create momentum. Adding people creates momentum. Adding finance creates momentum. If momentum does not move forward, then maybe it's time. But if you have the passion and you are moving forward, then I think you're still on the right path. But you know it when you see it. When there's no momentum, no one cares. I mean, we kind of touched on it. If no one cares about your idea, we're like, keep it quiet. Don't talk about your idea. It's secret. Tell everyone. Tell everyone your idea, because if no one cares about it, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But I would say momentum is the key thing.
Great. Chris, one thing is there's mics on this side, so if you just talk into it for the video, just pass down the mic, thanks. Go ahead, Chris.
So my question is not for anyone in particular, but just for general. Is there, when you're looking at kind of the product or service from the customer standpoint, is there any questions you ask yourself that you think maybe the customer would ask, or is there any sort of mindset, I guess, that you approach when looking at the product?
Yeah, I could answer the product company. We did a ton of interviews and focus groups with moms because two people's experience does not represent culture. Right. So it was a long process but also kind of long but not super formal. And I think that idea of exposing your idea is spot on. The more people you talk with it about, and we continue with our product to be in those conversations, and a lot of it happens through social media, which was a little different than when we started. But yeah, I would say you just have to continue to do the homework, continue to listen, and evolve your product or service based on what the need is.
I heard a good something yesterday. It says, know who your customer is first before you develop it, before you go with it. So there's so many moms, that's your customer. But if you've got a great idea and a product, know who's going to buy it, know who your customer is, get a feeling for it. And if you can't get a feeling for it, it's probably not a good idea.
And Harry, how did you get for your customers for land? How did you identify those customers that wanted land as a dream, as an opportunity to own something? What was that process?
We put an ad in the paper and said, land bargain. And people came flocking out of the cities, and they wanted to move to Vermont, and everybody wanted to be in New Hampshire and Vermont and New York State. And it was pretty simple once we found out who the customer was.
I like to add just a little bit to that. I think every 5 years, entrepreneurs' requirements change, And today, before you get funding, they want customers. They want ideally paying customers. So think about that through my first startup. We were building, they call the God boxes back in telecom, where they give you $25 million and you've done nothing. And you build these big, massive, industrial strength switches and routers, and it was a lot of fun and took a lot of money. Today, with software and cloud, they want you to have a business running before they even consider giving you money. So the games are changing. It's getting, there's more money out there, but it's getting harder.
Other questions? Go ahead, Brendan.
I don't need a microphone.
Oh, yeah, actually, you could. Thank you.
Okay, is it working?
That's right. It's for the video.
Oh, it's for a video. Okay, my bad. This question could probably apply to all four of you guys. Any of you guys are more than happy to answer it if you want to. Just long story short, I'm really passionate about economics and something that's theoretical, and I think this could really apply to entrepreneurship and business owners and stuff like that. And something that I'm really curious about is, okay, so the economy sort of goes up and down. You have economic growth, economic decline, like the 2008 recession, 2001 recession, stuff like that. And the idea is that businesses, like we reach a point where the unemployment rate kind of stagnates or so, before any recession or so. The idea is that it's harder to find additional employees, right? You guys go through times where, depending on the industry and sector, you might have a hard time finding additional employees to hire, right? Do you find that okay, businesses sometimes borrow a large sum of money, like say through debt funding or so, like issuing bonds and stuff like that, and have a hard time effectively investing in it to hire additional workers and stuff like that, therefore causing financial problems for the business? So in other words, kind of what I'm saying is, depending on the state of the economy, are there times where it is hard to actually, money that financial capital you've received, actually find an effective way to spend it and actually pay it back if the economy is, say, in a bad situation? And let me know if I need to kind of rephrase that.
It's not a problem.
Yeah.
You can always hire new people if you pay them enough.
Yeah, I think there's, we're in the construction industry in general is, back in 2009 and 10 lost more than 20% of its workforce, and people then went off and did other things. There's been a 25-year kind of maybe migration away from kind of trade work and kind of voc tech ed and things like that, and investment in those. So we have a really, really hard time attracting workers. So even if, when you're hiring, when you have kind of capital, I really think it's all, can you sell your idea, and what's the economic environment to kind of get revenue? And if you can get revenue, you have to have the people. But I view downtime as, kind of downer periods is when you go out and get the better people and the best people, and you upgrade your people, and then you're constantly ramping that up as you hit these kind of cycles. I hope, we're at the end of a 10-year kind of bull run here. And it's not going to be like 9 and 10. The fundamentals don't indicate that, but it's going to slow or flatten, let's call it that. And I'm really positioning the company to say, let's kind of make hay while the sun shines, put capital aside, and then go out and, I'm going to use the term, steal the best talent in that 1 or 2 year period, and then come out of it almost accelerated for growth. It's really how I'm thinking about the economy as it relates to.
If you want to go, I'll go. I could talk hours for this one, but if you have something.
I just have a quick, I think I have a different perspective. Our workforce is mainly professional. We use a contract manufacturer, so that situation's different. I think them in Vermont, especially in southern Vermont, getting hourly workers is tough, and they've gone through times where they really are struggling to stay staffed. But in our office, we have about 27 employees now. It's culture, so it's not money. I mean, we do pay well. We've done the research to understand what jobs in each of the areas that we're hiring for are paying across the country, and we have great benefits, but I think a big part of what keeps people there is a combination of the culture we've created internally and the passion we have around the mission that we're on, and it just attracts people. We've definitely stolen people from other companies, but it's all because they've contacted us and they're interested in what we're doing. So I think if you've got an idea that is a good idea and you're excited about it, it attracts people.
What creates the culture?
What creates the culture is
Leadership, right?
yeah, leadership, totally. Yeah, but it has to take on a life of its own too. You can't be top down with it. So we started with really considering, okay, what are our values? And you go through this exercise, you're like, all right, does everyone really believe that? Because we could come up with values, but if the employees don't buy into it, it means nothing. So we now have those more integrated into how we do performance reviews and how we talk about success at the company, and I think it's taken on a lot more meaning. So but it's continual process, and each person you hire, especially at a small business, changes the culture or has the opportunity to change the culture in a positive or a negative. So you have to be really careful about how you manage different situations, because one person can make a culture really toxic.
So I completely agree with everything. If you have money, whether it's a good economy or a bad economy, it doesn't matter because you have the money. But as a startup person where I typically have no money, it's really the journey, it's the joy, it's the promise of potential. Sometimes when I get, say, a founding team, they have a higher stake in the company, so they know that there might be a higher play out there. But the younger folk coming out of school is that I'm going to teach you something that is brand new, that's very hard to learn in school. And you're not going to necessarily kill it here at this startup, but you're going to learn all the tools to hopefully do it yourself. And so when you have money, a lot of things get a lot easier. But this culture thing that you mentioned, when you get those type of people that want to work together, it actually is a multiplier effect. And really entrepreneur type people all have a good time and have a lot of fun. So inspire them, leadership, bottom up and top down.
The big takeaway from that is rich or poor, it's nice to have money.
Other questions? Go ahead, Jack.
So first of all, thank you very much for coming. I definitely appreciate this opportunity, so thank you for being here. My question is, how do you grow a team from nothing? Could you talk on the process of making those first couple hires and how crucial it is to your business?
I can start sales. I mean, you have no business if you're not selling something. So we invested heavily in she was our second hire actually, but she's our EVP of sales, and then she created the team. And that, I would say, for us was one of our critical hires. But then pretty quickly, and I'm on the operations side, it was, okay, product, supply chain, all the things that could bring you down if you don't have it dialed. So I think just building a team based on priorities and not overcommitting, because I think that's probably a trap of thinking you need more people than you do. And we started with a lot of generalists. So we didn't, and now at the size we're at, which isn't even that large, we're hiring much more specialized positions. And I think that's probably how it goes when you're a startup.
Yeah, I think that's important. Everybody pitches in, everybody kind of does everything, you're all in it together, and that kind of esprit de corps is really powerful and really positive. And then it does get into kind of specialties, and then it gets beyond that, and it gets to everybody's a bit siloed, and then how do you kind of re-engage
Right, it's a cycle.
and get people to collaborate again, yeah.
I mean, I think it's a lifetime choice, meaning that find people you like that are really smart and really talented. They can be your friends, they don't have to be your friends, but you should spend your whole life finding special people all the time. That's what you do. And whether it's coffee, beers, whatever, find these people, keep in touch with them, because your next idea, you may want to call them, or they may have the next idea. So it's endless, it's always, and again, find the best people, and that's the only way to make anything work. Because again, if you have all the money, that still doesn't make it happen. People make it happen. So keep on finding them.
Other questions? Caleb, go ahead.
So Thomas, I really commend you on your attitude on problem solving. The idea that you go out and find the hardest possible problem that you can find.
And just watch my next my speech tonight.
And you also determine what are the highest value problems as well. Obviously, there's a correlation between which one are the highest value and which one are the hardest, because if they're high value and they were easy, people would already solve them. But in this process where you're looking at really, really tough problems, at what point do you decide it's not worth me trying to solve it anymore and move on?
So actually, that's a. I'll do a little nuance to that. I solve problems all the time. I put it on this conceptual shelf, and when I'm ready to do my next startup, I look at the market, I see what I think is worth solving, and I say, I think I can apply this to that. So before I started this current company, I had 3 ideas. Who's heard of blockchain, right? Come on. I had an idea in that. I had an idea in augmented reality. But and I had technology to address both those technologies. But when I saw that data was continually getting bigger, and I know this problem, I took it off that shelf. So if to the point of solving a really hard problem is key, but if no one cares about it, that's the other thing. For me, because I'm a technology innovator, I use that as a spearhead of thought, and then see how it applies into the market. But again, it's all about the customer. If no one's going to buy it, it doesn't matter. In the end, technology, I'm going to say this, and I'm a technology guy, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The business has to matter. And I just happen to convince investors to give me money on really cool, fun stuff, and then we happen to make a business on it.
Can I further that question? What do you do? What's your creative space?
So that's a whole So I have my process, and I've been honing it and training it over the years. One, I could say I'm partly brain damaged, meaning that my brain doesn't work very well. No, I'm just teasing. But you want your brain to randomly do random things because you want to have divergent thinking and always do something inverse. If you see the world doing this, 100% go the other way. But to your question, I have Saturday mornings. You have to be fully hydrated, no drinking on Friday nights, fully caffeinated, and having an open space where it's really early and you just think and you ponder, maybe you surf the web, and you're waiting for something to come to you, and you go, there's a thread there. Let me start looking at that. And again, depending on what the direction is going, look at the inverse. Look at what people are not seeing, what they're not doing. And I do that with algorithms, I do that with computer science, I do that with business. I guess a lot where I think the market's going to go in technology, and everyone thinks you're wrong until they realize you got there, like, oh, of course we believed in that. But for me, it's letting your unconscious solve the problem, but feed it information, but lots of information. Like consume just enough. And this is where I say just enough, because if you read too much, now you know too much. And now you're forced into an avenue of thought that will force you down a path. So consume just enough. But I would say this, if you have an insight and you Google it and you see that it's been solved, you're on the path. Don't stop. Your innovation, your free thought is working. Keep on seeing what level you can take that idea to. And lots of caffeine. But fully be hydrated before you start.
No drinking.
No, you have to. No, drinking is after you figure, eureka. And you call all your friends going, I think I got it. I think I got it.
How many of you have an idea book, either electronic or on paper?
I don't call it that, but I do.
Well,
yeah.
But a place to put those thoughts. Like, I had done 3 startups, and I still go back and look at ideas that I had from like the late '80s. Yeah. But a place to jot it down, even if there's nothing else you do with it, is
I would say this though. I would say be careful electronic. I deleted something that I thought I wrote all the algorithms down, and I somehow deleted it. And it turned out I actually came up with a better idea, so it actually worked out okay. Like if it's really good, make it fireproof, make it on paper, tell a friend. If you really have a good idea, tell somebody else that you trust, just in case something breaks down. I don't know.
Fatalist. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead, TJ.
So one of the biggest challenges that sort of I've had to face in the different businesses that I'm working in is, you think you're on the path and things are going great, you have lots of opportunity, but then something else comes along that's kind of related, could be good, and could be maybe even bigger than what you're thinking of right now. What's the thought process you guys have in those situations for being able to determine, do I keep on my current path or is it time to pivot?
I have lots of. I'll wait to the.
I can answer that from within a business. There's challenges and opportunities every day that could be great ideas or it could be just going down a rabbit hole. And one of the processes that's like a product development thing is stage gating, where you actually, there's stages and they're the points in the process where you stop and you decide, okay, have we met the criteria to move to the next stage? So can be as formal as you want it to be, but that's really helped us to narrow it down and focus on initiatives that meet our strategy and line up with our strategy. So, but that's from within a business. I can't really speak to, just ideas in general.
In startup world, they call it pivoting, and so many successful companies that you've never heard of or then become you heard of was a pivot. But then again, you can over pivot and you never heard of these companies. So is there a right science to this? Sometimes it's just darn luck. But if you constantly are pivoting every 3 months, you probably don't got it right. If you pivot every few years, maybe it's okay. But it is something to watch out for, because you get somebody in the company that says, I have an idea. And if it's in your vision, maybe it's a messaging exercise, but it's a risk. But also, if you don't pivot, you maybe not listen to your customers, right?
I think it's key to, and again, from within a business, and we over initiative ourselves like crazy. Let's do this. And it's 40 things, and you can't advance any of them, right? You can inch every one of them along versus power through on one or two kind of core things. And we always go back to what's the kind of core strategy, what's the core purpose, and how does this next set of steps, next year, whatever, align with that direction. And if it's different than if you've stalled and it's time to pivot, but often pivoting is still in line with kind of what you're really trying to solve, and it's better.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
So just one question. So this last week I had listened to Jimmy Wales, who's the founder of Wikipedia. And it was fascinating to me in that he had talked about how absolutely sure he was of his 3 ideas before Wikipedia that all failed miserably, and he was proud of his failure. And Wikipedia was sort of something they threw together. It didn't seem to make a lot of sense, but he said he'd try it, and of course that was the one that took off. So failure is part of entrepreneurship, right? So and innovation, like that by definition, that's it. So if each of you could sort of talk about, what was one failure that was hard, impactful, but that you bounced back from or learned from to get to where you are today. So if you want to go straight down, Harry, if you want to start with that. Or
I don't. That's a tough one. Rephrase it for me, would you?
So failure. So if I think about
something I failed at.
Yes, something in the business that failed, or obviously economic cycles tend to have impact on real estate as they do construction. So what was that failure that was brutal, that you sort of dug deep and figured out how to bounce back from it?
I think that we constantly evolve. We've evolved our businesses, and if you notice that there's a decline, don't wait until the decline sets in and it's a death knell. Keep innovating, keep what you've got, and keep improving on it. It's a tough question.
Yep. Okay. Les?
So I'm still living through one. So I started an academic group down in New York to build kind of projects for higher ed, K through 12, all that. Went down, this was, 8 years or so ago. I stepped out of one role, went into that role, and said I'm going to start this unit. Year one was small. We were about 10 million in revenue, and it was really profitable. It hasn't been profitable since, and and yet it's masked by the overall revenue and profitability of the company. But when you break out this division has never really got there, and it's an every year, I need the infrastructure to grow into the revenue. And so it's really overhead that's killing the profitability. The core business is profitable, but and I have a board of directors, and I report to that board of directors kind of on our profitability per division, and I continue to report that this division isn't there yet. Yet I believe in what this will ultimately be, and I've gone back and used, and so it's hard though. It's hard to sit up there every day and say, should I abandon this or not? And that's that notion of sunk cost. and it's really, really difficult to abandon sunk cost. But sometimes it's absolutely, it's gone anyway, right? So but it's becomes kind of emotional versus, I think, intellectual at that point, or even logical. But I still believe in this business, and I think we're going to break even this year. And it's been about 6 or 7 years, and
No
then
such thing as breaking even.
but there's a point where it will be a very, very big kind of add to the equity of our company several years out.
And in that process, do you look at what the opportunity cost is missing somewhere else? Like if there's an additional market that maybe you guys aren't in, that you go, same time and effort, might be easier lift, or?
We do. We look at it all the time. And always gnawing at the back of my head is, no matter what other thing I do, there's this kind of organic timeline to grow into the market. There's maybe a mergers and acquisition way to grow into the market. I look at the sunk cost on this one particular venture and say, I could have bought a company and have been there much, much quicker, provided buying that company worked. And very few, very, very, it's a low percentage of mergers and acquisitions that truly work. So I'm in the middle of it, and it's not, and I'll tell you one more thing on failure is, engineering is really not conducive to kind of accepting failure, right? Because you can't fail, right? And so there are factors of safety, and you can't fail. Yet every entrepreneur says, that failure was the best thing that ever happened to me. And so it really, and I have to be aware of that when I look at the folks in my company, and I'm trying to get them to push the limits. Right. And if there's a fear of failure in the culture, you're not going to be that innovative.
I don't know if it's failure so much as just a lot of wasted calories focused on an initiative that just never came to life, and it was really hard to let go of, and for me personally. So just a little more about our business. We sell the pods to facilities. So we're not, the moms are the users, but our customers are, facilities people, corporations, companies. And what we were recognizing, because we were in a lot of airports, is that there's an opportunity for branding on our units. So there are billboards, basically. And we have this great app, and you can, put advertising in the app and sponsored content. So we had the platform. So we're like, this is great. We could have this whole side business where we're selling advertising and a media play. It's a different business. It is not the same thing as selling a product to a facility. Running a media company where you're selling out ad space, basically, is a completely different business. So we spun on it for way longer than we should have, and we weren't focusing on our core business, which is putting more spaces out into the world. And we eventually all decided, there's 4 of us that are on the executive team, and we all decided to just pause and not put any more resources towards it. But it was a tough one for me because coming from an advertising background, I was like, I know this is a good idea, but we just aren't big enough. We don't have the funding right now to create a whole separate business within our business. So that was a good learning, and just knowing when to really not give up, but just acknowledge that, okay, maybe good idea, but not right now.
Yeah, failure. I struggle with this question. I've gotten it before. I'm going to say it. I don't believe in failure. But it's perspective. So you ask a VC, did you make any money? No, that's a failure. For me, it's a journey, and every startup I've done has completed a journey that I set out to do. This current business, I want to do really hard tech and really be successful business-wise. So it's easy to see failure when you put a dollar amount on it. But I would say the companies that I've created that were, maybe this didn't make as much money as that one, I've created a team through that journey that has allowed me to do this even harder project, even bigger project. And so to me, to see those things as failures, it's hard because, not that all my things were, a lot of them were successful, but the term failure I just struggle with because I expect to have little failures and micro situations. If you're a programmer, systems fail all the time. You're used to this. So I would say failure is in the eye beholder, but to your VCs, to your salespeople, it's about making money. And so, but it's funny. I always think that, and again, I happen to think this way, so I can't help myself. Every failure is an opportunity to make it successful. So the question is, when do you give up? Never. Just repurpose it, change it a little bit. And let's say one startup doesn't work well. Let's say that VC, give them that great opportunity for the next one, so that they make their money back. It's I struggle with that failure one.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
So anyone who hasn't asked a question yet, just want to look around. Francesco? Go ahead.
I'll go with one. So, Mr. Hisco, he was a Mr. there. I noticed by reading your bio that you have a lot of women employed compared to the rest of the workforce. Why did you start doing that? What motivated you to jump into that, especially comparing the numbers that I'm reading here of like across the workforce? I'm seeing it's like 9% in your industry, and you have about 35% of people in your company that are women, which is great. And I'm just curious of how did you start doing this early, and what pushed you to do that?
Great question. I love the question. So really originally our whole culture is about people being their best self at work. So if you're at work and you feel respected, you feel challenged, and you feel you have a career path, you feel heard, you're energized and you show up energized. And when you show up energized, our whole business model is let's be the best customer service provider to our clients. And so we really don't think of ourselves as a construction company. We think of ourselves as a service provider. So we want to delight our customers. So we back that into every single employee has to be really jazzed. So that leads you to kind of doing a lot of diversity and inclusion work, which is, there's a lot of unconscious bias out there. There's a lot of, particularly in the construction industry, which has historically been kind of white male and a bit rough around the edges. So we've been on this kind of diversity journey for 20 years. And so it was always the right thing to do, was to kind of have, and from a business perspective, show up at a client meeting at a client that's in the advertising agency, which maybe has 50% female, and we show up with all guys. That's just bad business, number one. Two, it doesn't fit with our values of everybody's jazzed at work, right? And then lay that in with a worker shortage, and kind of lay that over engineering and construction management degrees in the population of the schools. We need to mirror all of that, and it all kind of works together. So we really started very early, and and we really push it. We push it and say, so our incoming class of college grads, and we hire 30 a year into a 3-year program, so there's 100 in this program. This year was more than 50% women, and that overall program is now 50% women. So now I will tell you, and we look in the mirror pretty brutally, and 50% women at the entry level. By the time I get them to mid-manager, it drops to that 30. By the time I get them to the kind of executive team, it drops to 10. That's a business problem for me. And that is wonderful talent. And there's old stereotypes like, oh, well, women left to have a baby, that's why they're not here. So I went back and proved to my team that every single person who left us to have a child is now working for one of my competitors. So what's wrong with us? And we had to solve that problem. So.
You just took my speech from tonight.
Oh, come on, sorry.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. Other questions? Go ahead, Jacob. If you could.
This is, I guess, for like marketing more related, or just like in terms of clients. So like when you are trying to sell something to a specific client, and at first like it takes a little convincing, and then they may seem like slightly interested, and then you like may try to sell it a little more, and then they start to back off. When's like the point where you say, okay, they clearly don't want it, versus where you like don't stop until they say yes? Like, is that like which route is the better way to go? Or
that's a good question. I'm speaking from a category that didn't exist. So there are not businesses out there shopping for portable lactation rooms. Like, there's no such thing. So our salespeople are constantly educating, and that's a big part of the sales process. Educating, if they have to go there, talking about legislation, but really it's about doing the right thing and being an inclusive company. And I think from a technique standpoint, you have to really know the psyche of who you're talking to, and that comes with experience, but also there's a lot of training out there for salespeople that can help you with that. But I do think we do a lot of work around personas, so we've got stakeholders in the decision making, so we call them Facilities Frank or HR Helen, and we really put attributes to these fictitious people, but they represent sort of the psyche of the person you're talking to. So it really helps, I think, the sales team to wrap their head around, okay, these are some of the pushback I'm going to get. Here's how I respond. Here's what this person needs from me, and how am I going to answer that question before they even ask it. So it's a real talent. I mean, not everyone can sell.
There's a lot of preparation to selling.
Yeah.
There's a lot of prep. Really.
I guess one thing to add on that, would you, when you're selling to somebody, depending on what you're selling, is it better to start out with a lot or a little, or is there a middle ground? Do you tell them all about your product, or do you say hey, does that sound interesting to you? And then if they say yes, is it okay, if it's interesting, then this is what we have to offer?
Well, in this day and age, there's ways of doing inbound marketing where you can put information out on the interweb and people find it who are looking for that type of information, so they can get a lot of the answers before they even get to you. So it's a way of sort of tightening your funnel for sales. So by the time they come in and actually reach out to you, they're a qualified lead. So I think that's probably a better process than just cold calling when you don't really know what their needs are and where they are in the whole decision-making process.
I'm amazed by salespeople. So coming out on engineering, I could never do what a salesman, now being much older now and being on both sides, I see what needs to get done. But I know for my engineering team, if they had to pick up a phone, or they would fail epically. It does require a lot of talent.
Oh, you didn't believe in failure.
Okay, sales engineer, fair enough, good one. But it takes the right people, and it takes a lot of training, and there's some really good software out there to help track some of the questions that you mentioned, like how is the customer engaging, is important.
And Harry, sales is a big part of your business. How do you?
Well, first of all, I don't know if today we have courses in salesmanship. It's a talent, and it's a learned ability. And I think University of New Hampshire does. Do we have a sales course here?
There's a sales program now. There is.
All right.
Yeah.
We don't have one here in the East Center.
Well, I would say that we are teaching students to do customer discovery, which is by default the sales process automatically.
Right.
But there's a sales club. There's an individual that does that. Is there an academic course for sales? Yeah. So there's an academic course for sales as well as a club. So that's only 2 or 3 years old. So it's maybe 3 years old. That's relatively new for Durham.
Yeah, you asked some very good questions if you haven't been in sales. Those are great questions. We teach sales in our company every day. We have a sales trainer, and people get recycled every single 6 months. If you haven't been to training, you go back to training, because it's an art, and we have a great sales force and a great marketing company, but we have an exceptional sales force, and it's learned. And if you want to see me afterwards or sometime, I'll get you some information that would really help answer your question.
Great. So I'm going to turn the tables here. I know there's probably a lot more questions, which is fine, and maybe afterwards you can ask them. But I want to turn the tables. So some of this is let them just stop talking about their businesses and their experiences and put on the advisor hat, right? So advisor is a key part to all businesses, right? Whether it's an official board, the eCenter has its own advisory board that helps guide what we do as well. So I'm going to pick on a couple of you. I haven't told any of you prior, so this will put you on the spot to see how well you can do your 30-second or 45-second pitch, and then talk about your number one problem, right? So it's going to be, so TJ, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, I'm TJ Everts. I'm CEO of two companies. My primary one is called SmartWheel. We are a company dedicated to developing proactive technology for safer and smarter driving. So our product that we're developing now, we're in beta now, is called SmartWheel. It's the first intelligent steering wheel cover that helps tackle the problem of distracted driving, which is a huge problem even today, where 400,000 people are seriously injured and 3,000 people die. And all of it's 100% avoidable because distraction is a choice that people make each time they're in the car. So we've developed a technology that installs on any car, just like a regular steering wheel cover, and it monitors how the person drives, where they put their hands, and alerts them in real time when it detects the dangerous behavior. And that data is then recorded, so that people can access it later via their smartphone, gives them unique insights, driving data, driving safety grade, and provides them suggestions for improvement. So that's sort of the core of our business. Right now we're in beta. We have several customers lined up. We have paying customers. But I guess one question I have now is we're in the point now where we're growing beyond sort of what our team can handle in terms of all the different development work. Like we start off hiring a bunch of generalists, right? So you have people who are very good at a lot of different things. But we're at the point now where we want to start branching out and sort of delegating some of that. We brought on interns from University of New Hampshire, which has been great over the summer, 3 interns. So I guess one question I have for you, or one of the biggest problems I guess you guys can provide advice on, is talent. As a startup, as a student startup, tips and tricks, where do you look now, especially with the talent shortage and all that?
I guess I'll start since you have a little bit of software. One question to you is you're CEO of 2 companies.
I am, but one of them is more of like a consultancy, so it's not my full guess.
So my always recommendation is focus. And it's hard to do multiple things at once. We talked about having all diversions in the company, so that's one quick advice. If you look for software engineers. Do you have someone that's a hiring manager, someone that's run engineering teams, their experience, whether it's outsourced or finding local talent? If you don't have that person and you need that person, that's what I would do, is find that person and maybe even make them a founding member of your company, because if it sounds like you're a very product focused company, and if you don't have that person, I go find that person, and they know all the people in the Boston, New Hampshire area.
Tell me go over what your product is again.
Definitely. So when I was 14, my friends were starting to learn to drive, and we got to experience sort of firsthand some of the dangerous stuff that happens behind the wheel of new drivers. And we thought, well, there must be a solution out here for this. Distracted driving is such a huge problem, but all we found were recording devices. So we decided to create a device that would be able to proactively detect when the driver is distracted and alert them in real time with audio and visual alerts. So we provide audio tones and lights on the wheel to the driver to be able to refocus them to the road. Especially, we're targeted towards new drivers, and from a data aspect, we're also targeted at fleet vehicles. Those are 2 markets that have shown the most interest, and we're partnering with them now. We have betas in both. Our goal is to narrow down to one to sort of launch fully into.
But it's the steering wheel cover that beeps and lights up to tell you that your hand's off the wheel or you're distracted, right? Okay,
exactly. Yeah. And so we sort of built the business backwards in a way too, kind of like what you were describing. We had a great opportunity for marketing. We were featured on ABC's Shark Tank in season 4. We were featured on the Today Show, a bunch of popular magazines and that sort of thing. So we had a lot of really great interests in both in terms of like funding and in terms of like opportunities and partners and customers early on before our product was mature. So of course now we're playing that whole game of catch up. So we've been making good progress, which is good.
So who's your customer?
So our customer is parents of new drivers, specifically exactly the time initially when their kid graduates from driver education. So that moment when they get their license, they paid $600 to educate their child, and it's not a magic wand. When they get their license, they're not instantly safe drivers. So being able to provide peace of mind to parents right after that, for that period of 1 year after they get their license, when they're 10 times more likely to get into a fatal car crash than any other time in their life, that's sort of our initial target market. And we have partnerships with driver educators now, and they're like probably the most excited group of people we've talked to.
How many employees do you have
So we have 8 people on the project now. Yeah.
Do you, my kind of one piece of advice is, if you're looking for talent, really think through and write down exactly what you want. And we call it when we go out and look and hire an executive recruiter, they write a spec, and that spec is exactly, and it's almost like super person, right? It's everything you want. And then as you start meeting people, and I think it's networking, it's a lot of networking. There's certainly job boards and all those kinds of things, and that tends to be, you see a lot more to weed it down to very few. Networking, you tend to get, I think, higher quality folks that are going to be more aligned right from the get-go. And then you start going down through that list and say, am I getting 8 of the 10 things I want? Am I getting 7 of the 10 things I want? And you're going to make a better choice, I think, with talent.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Do you want to give a single problem for your friend Ambrosia?
Yeah, so my name's Chris Hollis. My company is called Ambrosia Fabrics, and I sold furniture for about 1.5 years. And after doing so, realized that 90% of the fabrics that I was actually selling were synthetic. They were polyester, acrylic, nylon. And I saw the growing trend of hemp and bamboo in clothing, and I said to myself, why doesn't anybody pursue this for furniture as well? So I dove into the subject and, thank you. Saw the different fabrics that were on the market that were made of hemp and made of bamboo, and realized that the bamboo that was on the market wasn't natural bamboo like people were claiming, and realized that there was a lot of chemical processing still going on. So long story short, we are developing sustainable upholstery fabrics made of hemp and made of bamboo that are also processed sustainably and don't have a fraction of the chemicals that are on almost all the fabrics that you'll walk into a furniture store and see. And one of the biggest issues I think that I'm running into right now is really just kind of filtering all the information that I'm receiving. I am doing a lot of customer development, working with Ian, hearing multiple different opinions on whether this is something that people would consider purchasing. I guess I'd be curious to know what your decision-making process is, and how you filter multiple opinions and kind of, say, okay, this is the path I'd like to go, when you're hearing 2, 3, 4 different opinions at a time.
That's a really good question. I think that sort of comes back to your gut and why you started the business you started and what are the truths about that. I think it's important to do research, but it is easy to get detracted from your original idea. So I think you just have to constantly gut check, and also do the additional research. If someone has given you advice that's interesting or compelling, do your own research and validate it, because again, it's easy to say something, but take that extra step and really understand what they're suggesting and is it a good idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, and maybe less of a piece of advice and more of a reaction. Being in my business, and I guess, where are you targeting the fabrics? More for residential type furniture, or more for commercial type furniture, or maybe all of it and try to go for a much bigger market?
Right. Initially, my target was for residential. A couple people have mentioned the idea of doing a commercial grade fabric, and I've thought about it. But I think at first I'm targeting the residential.
And here's my reaction. So every project that we build that has furniture coming into it, particularly in larger cities, well, really in all kind of education facilities, it gets secondarily treated. So you kind of do the right thing and create this great sustainable product, low in chemical, blah, blah, blah. And then Boston Fire says you got to go out and fire treat it. And you've just kind of undone all the benefits of your product. And I think you just got to do research along those lines, as well as what happens after you sell this thing. And there's certainly a huge market in construction for kind of green and sustainable materials that will make it all the way through. And I think you got to find some of the right people to say, how will this then do? What's going to happen to it down the kind of sale chain?
Right. That's a good point.
Great. So, so not only do we have profit companies, we have for-profit companies and non-profit companies. Marissa, did you want to talk a little bit about Toy Library and a key problem you have?
Hi, I'm Marissa. working on the New Hampshire Toy Library Network. So especially for children with, I was a child development major. I got my bachelor's in May. Especially for children with adapted abilities, toys can automatically be 2 to 4 times the cost the second they're adjusted, for children and families who often have higher medical expenses anyway. And then also 80% of plastic toys end up in oceans, landfills, incinerators, regardless adapted or not. So it's a sustainability issue as well. And our network essentially operates as college students running each of these. So we really wanted students to get work opportunities as well. But we are filing to be a nonprofit, so our revenue is a little different, a lot of grant applications. And I think one of the things where we've been struggling with is something that's come up a few times in different ways. Mr. Hazel mentioned momentum and also focus, and then Mr. Patton mentioned kind of maintaining and keeping the business where it's at without getting too big. So I guess my question or the problem that we've been running into is we want to grow, and we do have our first site opened this summer at a library, and Concord is going to open one, NHTI, Concord's Community College. But my question, I guess, then becomes, how do you kind of gain momentum and traction without getting like crushed by the snowball? I don't know if you have any advice on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of there, so it's hard to give advice because I feel like we're living it. It's really easy to get into a situation where you're over-promising while you're building towards what you're promising, because you don't want to, if you can't sell ahead, you don't have anything to grow into. So I think part of your challenge probably is human resources to run, and maybe finding the toys, or are they new, or are they?
Currently they're new because we didn't have the volunteer bandwidth to do a toy drive, but we're getting more people, we're having more funding gradually, but there's definitely a lot of interest, and I mean the infrastructure comes from local libraries, so that's helpful.
Yeah, and I think you just can't be afraid to say, we'd love to, but not now. And that's the best advice I could give, because it's really easy to overcommit.
And actually, I'll add to that. You always make promises that you can't keep until you fill it out. It also goes back to the people that are on your team. There's a lot of smart people, but there's a difference between smart and moving the ball forward. The ability to move the ball forward is something that I've never seen on a resume. I've never seen it on a test. And smart is not the problem. There's a lot of smart people, but it's something that's intrinsic to the person seeing a problem, seeing how to navigate to move that ball forward. And that is the ultimate employee. And you come up with that list of how to hire, and you just don't see it unless they are part of a company that they did it all by themselves. You never do a company all by yourself. So you know when you see it, but the success of a small resource trying to make promises and deliver those promises is someone that can deliver on those promises and see the nuance between what to do and what not to do. And I don't know if there was a formula, I would sell it. But these people, I mean, I'm sure you guys, the people that just go, they just get it done. Whether it's a salesperson, an engineer, a marketing person, they just know how to move the ball forward.
Yeah, I sit on several nonprofit boards, and so we're always looking at not unlike startup. Your number one issue is fundraising, right? So you've got to raise funds, and you'll get so much funds, and then you need to spend that same amount of funds so that you're then a nonprofit, right? So you're going to set your size by your ability to fundraise. You're going to have a volunteer board, and you're going to have volunteer people until you raise enough funds to have a staff. So those first people have to be completely mission driven, and so they're giving their all in a purely volunteer way, and so is your board. And so I think it's really important to pick do you have a board? Okay, so you have a board, and if that board's really passionate, and the boards go through transitions of purely volunteer where the board's actually working in the business, to then you ultimately, when you want to grow, you get to a board that's really more of a fundraising board. And there's really evolution. There's a lot of kind of stuff out there on this. There are a lot of books on this. There are people who will come and speak to you on this. And I'd suggest just kind of immersing yourself in a lot of that kind of nonprofit growth. And
that's great. Thank you.
Let me add a little something.
Please.
Thank you. I'm associated with some nonprofits, for instance, Massachusetts General Hospital. I've been on the board for 25 or 30 years or something like that. And, you know, Junior Achievement and quite a few places. And every year we give money, name a building or, you know, name a corridor or a bathroom or whatever it is, you know. 100 grand get you this, 250 get you this. Well, I've stopped doing that because I only give charities now to their development offices. In other words, I know that if I give Mass General Hospital $500,000, it's going to go in a big fund, right? And it's going to be sunk. I give it to the development office, the guys that are out raising more money so they can hire more people, better people, and it seems to work pretty well. And they like it because they can hire more people, they can do more things, and I think getting a development team where they're out raising money, because you always need money, always need to raise capital. Profit, non-profit needs it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, I think to that point, when you give to the development office, they're unrestricted funds. The challenge with grant writing, and you know, you'll get bigger dollars, but they're very restricted. So you need a combination of both private donation and grant writing to really kind of make a good mix. And there's formulas for that too, how much of each you should have, individual donor, corporate donor, and then grant type writing. But I agree, and when it's restricted, it's tough. Restricted often doesn't let you pay for staff.
Great. So we'll have time for one more. So Dylan, if you want to talk about Ecotext, you can't ask Thomas because he already advises you. Yeah. So, but at least gives you the opportunity to ask the other three.
Sure. So yeah, Mr. Hazel's probably heard this a lot of times, but for those who don't know, Ecotext, we're trying to sort of do what Spotify did to music, but for the college textbook industry. So we realize that right now it's very inflated, and every student is kind of required to buy their own books. For what reason? I mean, you kind of end up trying to recycle them or donate them. We found out that through customer research, a lot of people would love the idea of kind of streaming their books through an online platform. So everything would be much more affordable because it's virtualized books. It's kind of all in one place. You don't have to carry 10 pounds around with you at all your classes. And so that's kind of the platform that we're trying to build out. And so we're sort of positioning ourselves in the middle of like a three-way ecosystem where we are trying to obviously touch the students. Those are our customers. But we're also trying to hit universities as well as publishers because they're all kind of have similar interests. We just need to bring them all together and kind of get them behind our platform. And so I guess the biggest challenge that we're having right now is the classic, chicken and egg, where we can't really get a lot of students until we have a lot of textbooks, and we can't really get a lot of textbooks until we have a lot of students. And so the current strategy is trying to pull from both ends. But to Mr. Hazel's comment earlier, you have to be very focused if you want to achieve momentum, and that's kind of our issue is that our focus is divided, and we're trying to fight two fronts. And so I guess if any of you had any advice or feedback for maybe how we might want to proceed.
I think you have to find the textbook that's going to take a chance on you. So starting with the product, and then the audience will come. And I think it's not going to be easy because they have to trust that you're building something that they believe in. So I would say, if you have relationships and can work out a deal, even if it's a test or a prototype situation, to just get it out there and see what kind of response you get on the customer side. I don't know how else you would do it, because it is like you need both to have a business, but to have a product, you just need a guinea pig. And that, an example we had in our business is we didn't even have a business. We literally didn't have a business plan, but we had this idea, and we found someone to make a prototype, and we convinced the owner or the director of the Burlington Airport to put it in on Labor Day. And we were great at brand and media, so we got, we sent out a press release, and it got huge traction in the press. And then customers started calling, saying, can we order one of these? And that sort of kickstarted us getting a business together and manufacturing Dialed. But I think sometimes you just have to find someone who believes in the idea and will take that chance.
I think the chicken or egg is the challenge with any business that you want to start or grow or whatever. It's, you don't have unlimited funds, so you have to have some, money coming in, but you have to have that product. So I agree that you have to have a product. Just a quick story, my 12-year-old son goes to this private school in New York, which is so allegedly well-funded, at least I think so, because I pay plenty. And he's got an English teacher who is just, told this long story about, I can't find textbooks for the kids anymore, and so a big part of my kind of prepping for my next year is I've got to go to multiple places to find the textbooks that I really want. They're not making them anymore. They don't, and I don't really know much more than that in terms of data. But how do you talk to someone like that and say, how do I solve your problem, right? Because I do think you have probably, there's still some of that sentiment, right? What problem are you trying to solve? You're trying to solve expense, the cost to the student. You're trying to solve ease to the student or ease to the teacher, and maybe focus based on what problem you're trying to solve. And that might narrow your scope as you try to kind of get momentum.
I don't think we helped him at all.
And I'm not a lot of help. At least not here.
Now, to be fair, you have a beta out. You have 200, 300 students, so it's not quite as dire as Dylan has painted. So, which is great.
Yes, yeah, we do have a beta. We do have a beta out, and it's been fairly well received by students. And I think we are sort of electing to focus more on students for now. We've actually found a lot of books in certain programs, for example, philosophy or a lot of historical perspectives classes. They read a lot of classics and books that are open into the free domain, and so we actually have about 50,000 books on our platform already that are all just kind of sort of like, most of them are just old because the copyright has expired, but we have a lot of those books, and so we're trying to start maybe with those students in those classrooms where we already have the books, just to kind of get that critical mass that these publishers are looking for. But I appreciate all your advice. Thank you.
Great. So after we say thank you, we are going to do sort of a group shot. We'll probably just line up behind the inductees. So with that, I'm just going to wrap it up and just say thank you so much. Phenomenal insights. And thank you for sharing and sharing your experiences with some of the students. I can guarantee you there are another 100 more problems that they're trying to solve that we don't have time for. So feel free to connect when you can. But thank you very much.